Hey guys, Dave here with Take a Break Spas and Billiards. Today we are going to do some covering of the rails on our pool table here with our Simonis 860 cloth. There's definitely different techniques you want to use when you're doing Simonis as opposed to standard cloth like Championship, which is a really common brand. Simonis is more susceptible to wrinkles. It's a little bit harder to do. We've got it all set up. We've got our table ready. We've got our moving blankets down to protect it. First of all, you want to make sure that you get the correct side up because there is a top and a bottom on your cloth. Notice this is the top. So we're going to put the finished side down. First thing we want to do is get our feather strips out. Pull out our feather strip, set that there. Now we're going to go ahead and set our cloth in where we want it to be. Center it up left and right. Take your feather strip. With these, I like to push it in right here. And we're going to make sure that that is right on the edge there. Get our rubber mallet, just get it started. Notice that looks good and clean right there. We're going to put that in. I like to use the palm of my hand to try to steer my cloth left and right like this to make sure that that goes right in where I want it. Take your time. You want just very minimal coming out on that side. And the more even that you can do it, like this, the better it is. And if you do get to the end where this is poking out like this, make sure that I did have it tight on that end because my feather strip is too long. And I'm going to pull that out. I like to put this, get your putty knife or something like that just to protect it. Put it up underneath there. Take your blade or whatever you've got and go ahead and cut this off. So if you're struggling with your knife to cut that, a saw is actually better. And again, use your putty knife to protect that. Let's clean that off of there. And hopefully we trimmed that correctly. Notice how we still have a bulge on there, so I need to cut back just a little bit more. I'm going to pull that up. Now you can trim it back with your blade. Cut that off, put that like that. And you'll notice that that now wants to lay good and flat. Yes, that looks good. So now that we've got that, our feather strip, it's all pounded in. We're making sure that we're not poking out down here. We're gonna grab our blade. And the trick to trimming this edge right here is so that you don't slip and come across. You don't wanna cut this and you definitely don't wanna damage your rail. Most importantly, push down more so than you pull towards yourself. But you wanna take and use a really good blade as well. If it's not a good blade, get a good blade. But cut down. Notice I'm kind of just inching myself along there. And again, I'm pushing down as much as I'm pulling towards me, but you want to trim that edge off right there. I also like to trim this back just a little bit here. Trim that back. Once you get that in there, you can take and hammer that in. This is universal on how you would do any pool table. Simonis is no different than anything else, but you'll notice I've got just a couple of little stray strands there. All right, so now that we've got our feather strip in, you'll notice it's nice and trimmed very cleanly on the edge there. You want to make sure you have nothing on here. There's nothing on top of here. Check to make sure your cushion is glued in well. Sometimes you got to add some glue to those things. This thing looks really, really good on here. Then you're going to flip this over. Again, make sure that you've got a moving blanket or something like that to protect your rail. Make sure there's nothing on your surface that's going to scratch your rail. Fold that over. Now we're going to begin the stapling process. So what we want to do, I'm going to start on this end. You'll notice I like to hold my staple gun between my legs backwards like that. It's going to be right where I want it. What we're going to do now is we're going to staple this. Very, very important. What you want to do is land the very first staple in the right spot. And the way you know that is to pull your felt up, pull it up vertically like this. Then you can go back just a little bit but I want to land my very first staple right there. Notice how my pad ends right there? That's your relation. If you add it clear up here, you add it clear down here, it's not going to be the best place. And the other thing you want to do is make sure that staple is very close to the edge this way. Don't put your staple back in a ½ inch. You want to put them close to the edge. Now what we're going to do is we're going to start stepping down our staples. This you can pull pretty dang tight. Again, we want to get our staples right close to the edge. You'll notice as we're stepping those down. And as we step those down nice and evenly, you'll notice there's no wrinkles on here. I kind of like to fold that under, pull that back. This style of pocket requires this style. Some of them are cut off here and they have a cast iron stud for the pocket. In that sense, you just fold it around the backside to staple it. But for this one, that's perfect. We're gonna actually end up trimming right here. All this is gonna get trimmed off. But here's where the tricky part comes. Now that we've got this with no wrinkles whatsoever, we're gonna start turning the corner here. And the trick that you wanna do with Simonis is, number one, you don't wanna pull this really tight, because you'll notice how I've got a little ripple right there. If I pull that really tight, I wanna pull it snug, and I wanna keep my staples close together. Now the next technique that I've really used over the years, there's many, many different ways you can do this. But what I like to do is pull here and staple behind me. And you don't pull real hard. So this is, it's almost loose. And I almost want to do, if I show you, if I pull normal, I'd pull like that and I'd put a staple right there and you can see how that would ripple on there. If I were to pull one there, I put a staple there and I put a staple there, you could actually see some rippling in that. I'm not sure how well that'll show up in the camera, but so the trick is, again, don't pull right where you're going to staple and staple here. Pull here, staple here. Keep your staples close. Okay, so I'm going to pull like this, and I'm not pulling really hard. I like to get several staples down and then take a stop and look and see how this looks. Now I'm going to look down it, and you can barely hint see any wrinkles whatsoever in there. That actually looks really good. And I'll show you in a minute how we check this. Again, I'm just going to pull here, staple like this, really close together. I probably would do 1.5 times that distance if this was standard cloth. But with that one, that's about what we want to see. Again, pulling there, stapling. Okay, once we get close to the end, let's go down here. Very first staple. I can tell you, if you can land that staple in the first spot, you're going to be a lot easier to make sure that you can do this without wrinkles. Again, it's off the pad, just above it, close to the edge. Now we're going to start our little step down, and I'm pulling this tight currently. And once I round the corner, I back all my pressure off. Notice I'm pulling here and stapling behind me here. And for that last staple, I just barely pull. This is, when you do it correctly, you're going to want to see it step down like that. We're going to pull this back. We'll put 2 in the end. This looks perfect. There's a little dent there, but that's because the facing ends right where you see it. That's totally normal. But you'll notice there's no rippling across here. Little dent in the facing, looks exactly symmetrical. Perfect. The next step that we want to do is take our razor blade here, and I want to make sure that I have a good sharp blade. I think it was getting a little dull. So let's switch that around, and you can take and trim this off. Here and there, and that is done. If you do get lots of these little guys, you can just take and, I kind of like to just pull them together, because what happens with a lot of these little stringies on Simonis, sometimes they'll end up poking out into the playing surface, so they kind of drive you nuts a little bit, but don't worry about them too much. Just make sure that they are back there. Now that we've got that, the last thing I'm going to do, slip my rail over, make sure that this is good and perfect. And then last thing we're going to do is take with our rubber mallet What I like to do is put my hand on this, okay, so I keep it from bouncing around, and finish pounding. You'll notice that I don't have to hit super hard on there, and that is perfect. That's what you want them to look like. If you want to take and get a look at this right from the get-go, before I pull this feather strip out, I want to show you something. And what you're going to notice here is if I have that feather strip in there and that's perfectly flush right here, you're going to notice it's sticking out long. It's already sticking out long. If you'll pay attention to that before you start, you're going to want to trim that before you start. So you'll notice this is perfect down here. That's sticking out. I don't like that. A pair of side cutters here that I think will make them perfect cut on there. You can use a saw, you can use a blade. Razor blades just don't work very good, but you'll notice that's approximately what I cut off of there. Put that back in there. Let's size that up. Hey, what do you know? That looks a lot better. So what you're going to want to see is that right there. Now that's not going to poke out. Let's get our cloth. Number one, we want to make sure that we get the correct side facing up. And right now I want the bottom side. And this is one continuous rail, so we got to do two at the same time. First of all, take our feather strip, we'll start it right there, right at the end. Get that started, make sure that it's not poking out. You'll notice that I actually hammered it down because I wanted to sneak it over just a hair. And then we're going to take and pound that in, get our feather strip in. Again, you'll notice this looks pretty good. We're not poking out there. We're going to take and trim. The trick when you're trimming, again, is push down more so than pulling towards you. I like to trim this back ever so slightly right there. It just makes it easier to tuck that behind the leather, or behind the facing, the rubber facing on the end. Because if you just tuck that down like that, it kind of gets bunched up there. But if you'll take and cut it right from about right there, you might think I'm cutting my finger, but I'm not. I'm cutting against the rubber. That will fold down. You'll see sometimes that you've got, we call it licorice, but it's actually a rubber facing that goes on the table. You'll notice on this one I've got a little more showing on there, and that's fine. You don't want much more than that. But what I do want is I want it to be even. This is how we're going to finish our center pocket. Okay, I'm going to fold that down. I want a good crease up here. We're going to fold this up, and I can pull that tight and pull that up. The trick here is what we want. You'll know it's good because if the fold starts right at the top of the line and gives a nice clean edge on there, that's where you want that. You're going to land staples back there, and then to finish this back here, we're going to want to make sure that all that's nice and smooth, and we're going to staple it back there behind the facing like that, 2 staples, and that's kind of how you want that to look. The pocket will cover right there, so that'll look really good. We've got our rails all covered. One of the techniques that you want to do is make sure you don't pull too tight. As you'll see, there can be some rippling in there and you'll need to fix that. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please come and visit us. You can come to our store in Springville, American Fork, or West Jordan, or you can come visit us online at you know the routine, takeabreakspas.com. And if you're here in Utah, give us a call. We're happy to come and recover your table for you. We can do moves, we do all kinds of things, pool tables. Look us up. Appreciate you watching.